Okay, so now let's see how we can continue now with this projection, right? Okay, let's see how we now keep going with these volumes right here. The volume of the rib cage. So the width of the rib cage is a little bit male, is a little bit more than 1 head, it's about 1 1/4. So that's pretty good, right? And now I have here the pelvis, right? And the bottom of the pelvis is here, right? The sternum, the end of the sternum is about not halfway down from the top of the rib cage, but a little bit lower than that. So I take the midpoint, right, and then I lower it a little bit, and that's going to be the end of the sternum. At the end of the sternum, what I have is the top of the costal arch. So I see the costal arch here, I open it in here, and then here's going to be the sternum. The nipples are going to be just above the end of the sternum, here, a little bit, right, kind of a little bit. So the nipples are about at the 5th rib, the end of the sternum is about at the 7th rib, so, you know, you can approximate it. So I don't want to give you measurements that are too precise because I don't want them to become dogmatic, right? You have to kind of adapt to the situation. You don't want to use these this measurement as a dogmatic, because they tend to create figures that are too rigid. So I want you to base your analysis of the form mostly on observation, and these are parameters that are very indicative, right? Otherwise, we end up with figures that are kind of rigid, tubular, stiff, and that could be a style, right? That could be a style, but the style is going to be your problem. I want to just give you the mechanics of the body, the typical measurement. So now I see how I find the iliac spine here, right? And if I find the iliac spine, then I can find also the pubic bone here, and then here I have the inguinal ligament. The inguinal ligament connects the iliac spine with the pubic bone, and it gives me the end of the belly. The umbilicus is about at the same level as the top of the iliac crest. So the umbilicus is going to be here more or less. So here I can start imagining how the muscles in here, right, external oblique, right, here you're going to have the external oblique, are going to be compressed. And the rectus abdominis, this muscle in here, right, is going to be also kind of folded like that, right? So the leg, for example, here is, as we have seen, halfway between the iliac spines and the pubic bone. So, sorry for the shaking. That's the top of the leg. When you have the leg flexed actually like this, eventually this moves up a little bit more, but I just want to give you again a very indicative approach to draw this. So now that's the knee, right? The knee is going to be here, the knee is going to be here, right? That's the thigh, right? It's the thighs, right? Maybe bigger, right? And of course, I'm going to skip the rest of the legs, right? Because we don't need to draw the whole thing. So now here, I can block in, let's say, the shoulders, right? So shoulders are going to move back and forth, but tend to be a little bit posterior in respect to the axis of the rib cage. And so that's the top of the shoulder, it's the deltoid. And here maybe I have the humerus coming down. The humerus will be pretty much the same length as the rib cage, but starts from a little bit lower. So it is going to be a little bit lower than the margin of the rib cage. It gets down to the level of the waist. So that's the shoulder right here, right? That's another shoulder here, right? And now I can block here in the arms, clavicle, right? And so that's one way you can visualize bending bending the rib cage. So from there you can become much more you know, detailed stuff like that, right? I cannot show you that because that's from my next book, just to give you an idea. And then also another thing you could do is this. So let's see another thing we could do in a more sketchy way is this. We could draw the rib cage, right, as an egg, as a form like this. And I'm thinking already putting in perspective a little bit. I also think of the section of this. Now I kind of see that this is not sideways like this, but it's moving toward me like this a little bit. I am going to consider also the overlapping of the rib cage with the pelvis, right? If it's leaning forward, there's going to be some overlapping. So and of course you can block in the forms of the legs, the head, etc. Right? So meaning, think of these forms in a three-dimensional, you know, way, like forms are three-dimensional. Don't draw the rib cage as an outline, because that is terribly flattening. So think of these as specific, essential, simple volumes. And so, for example, the egg of the rib cage, you can draw it already trying to define the vertical and horizontal section. And you can draw this, when you connect this with the pelvis, you could kind of overlap in two, right? Because then later you can cut off part of this portion in here to create the waist. If you think it in these terms, you're going to think how these two segments is joined here. Is it joining in here, right? When you open then the costal arch, then you can kind of create more space for the waist, like that. So this now becomes an egg in a bucket, right? Egg in a bucket, and the two are kind of somehow joined at a certain point. And then maybe the neck too, you can really twist this thing whichever way you want. But you do need to think of them, and that's the trick. Think of them as three-dimensional object, right? So practice maybe doing this, you know, practice maybe doing sketching these very, very basic geometric volumes, and do not include the organic details too much, because they're going to be distracting. After that, you could start maybe putting in some more details like that for the muscles, but that's again for another time. I have quite a few videos that I had to prepare for you guys for your questions, so I'm really, really glad that so many people are following the videos, and I will try to answer all of them in a little bit at a time.